up, James? Welcome to the Sonic Truth, my friend.
What's going on? Pleasure being here, man.
Man,
great seeing you.
Yo, great seeing you too.
It's been a while.
About 18, 20 months, I'd say.
Yeah, and then before that, full sail.
A long time. But we always stayed in touch, which is super important to do. So welcome to today's show, and excited to have you on. You are
I'm excited to be here.
Engineer at ClearTrack Studios, and that is in Tampa, Florida. For many people who don't know, be sure to check that out. That's at cleartrackstudios.com. Is that correct? And we'll get a little bit more into what you do there a little bit later in this episode. But firstly, if you could share with the listeners a little bit about yourself. Where did you grow up?
I was born in Jacksonville, Florida. Moved to South Jersey because my dad was covering pro football. And in Jersey, I grew up and got into music in my teens, playing guitar. That eventually morphed into me taking some classes at KGM Studios in my late teens, and kind of like the class we run at ClearTracks. It was like a workshop thing, 10 classes, studying under Joe Alexander and Mitch Goldfarb, two pretty well-known engineers. And that led to me working there as a runner intern. And it kind of started this whole thing, which hasn't ended. It's 35 years later. I'm still doing it. So pretty cool.
Awesome. So about Philadelphia, what's one memorable food dish besides Philly cheesesteaks, right? Everybody knows about the cheesesteaks. From your childhood, someday, if you have now, it takes you back home.
The Italian food, pizza.
The Italian food.
I mean, South Philly, Italian area, Italian market.
Yes.
But eventually I became a vegetarian, so I cut out the cheese steaks.
Cheese and all that stuff?
Yeah.
What about the pizzas? Pizza's still flat?
Still good.
Okay, cool.
I'm not a hardcore vegetarian.
Right, you still throw down on the cheese and dairy every now and then.
Absolutely.
That's good to know.
So Philly had a vibrant music scene back then, too, in the late 70s, 80s. A lot of R&B, jazz stuff, a lot of rock and roll stuff in the 80s. So cut my teeth in a bunch of studios. I worked as a staff engineer at the Warehouse, which is owned by Obie O'Brien, who was Bon Jovi's producer. So kind of an assistant there, spent 5 years on and off working there, and then kind of just started bouncing around.
Doing a lot of freelance work.
Doing a lot of freelance work up in New York. A couple friends got signed to label stuff in LA, so was going out there and just gaining as much experience as I could, like assisting big name engineers. And eventually opened my own place. But
I think it's important today that a lot of people overlook the position of an assistant engineer. It's kind of thrown in their mindset that you're a constant runner, somebody who's always making breakfast for people, and that's more like the intern type of position. But I don't see many, I could be wrong, but not like it used to be in the 80s and 90s, where it's like, in order to really understand the process of recording, the process of the business, you had to be an assistant in order to do all of that. And I feel that that's kind of been taken out of today's. It's lost. It's no longer there. And people are just been given pieces of equipment that they may have purchased or buy these plugins, and they just don't know what to do with them. And it's unfortunate a lot of times. I just feel that that's been the missing link in today's studio world.
And that was normal back then.
It was.
Like there was like a hierarchy. I compare it to like being an athlete. You're in high school, you're a great baseball player, and you go to college on a scholarship.
Yeah, Division II or
Division I. You work your way up, double or triple A. And then if you get called up to the majors, that's like an 8-year journey.
Yeah.
You're sitting the bench, and if someone gets hurt, or an opportunity arises and you become a starter, you take that opportunity and run with it.
That's right.
And music's the same thing. I always felt like being around all these A-list guys, you develop a work ethic, you see and hear how things are done. I was handling documentation, and I'm going to just suck up as much information as I can because I'm in the room with these big name cats. Yeah. And eventually, maybe after a decade, you slide into the seat. I call it the hot seat.
Hot seat, yep.
Where now you're the guy. And it's sad that it's a lost art. And that's kind of why me and Mike started the class at Clear Tracks because it's kind of like a mentoring program.
Yeah, and I want to get into that. So can you give a little bit about Clear Track Studios? Can you explain about the facility somewhat?
It's a funny story. I had just moved to Palm Harbor.
You got to tell the story about the console too.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I'll get to that. Remind me.
Yes.
But went through a bad breakup, ended up by myself, didn't know a lot of people in Tampa, and I'm flipping through Mix Magazine, and there's an article once a year, the top 10 new studios in the U.S., and there's a little feature with a paragraph of it, and it's always L.A., Nashville, New York, maybe Miami, San Francisco, or some other big city, and I'm looking, and I see this studio, Clearwater, Florida, and it's Clear Tracks' Studio A room. It's a photo from the side. And I'm like, there's an SSL studio with a Studer in it, 10 minutes down the road from me. I grabbed the phone and called and drove over there and met the owner. And when I walked in, he kind of looked at me and was like, I know you from somewhere. And it turns out he was a student at Full Sail that I taught and you taught.
I know. We kind of put the numbers together, and I was like, wow.
And here's this young guy who I was amazed. Like, I looked at his gear and all the choices of microphones. I'm like, he's a young guy, but he gets it because everything was very analog heavy. And we have a system there called CLASP, which marries Pro Tools and the Studer tape machine, and they're locked. So you hit tape, and Pro Tools grabs the signal off the repro heads, and it shows up right in front of you in Pro Tools.
No more SMPTE on track 24?
No SMPTE stuff, and you just run the same reel. It's amazing. And sadly, the guy that started it in Nashville, moved on. He's like a brilliant guy.
And they're no longer available?
You can buy them used, but our system's been running rock solid for 12 years. So
wow, and it's called
We're
CLASP.
the only studio that has a closed loop analog signal processor is what it stands for. And you just put a reel up, no tape costs. You use the reel till it's beat up and then put a freshie up there. So you get the sound of analog with no cost.
That's unbelievable.
So for drums, it's amazing.
And think of that. Think of the fact that tape is even difficult to get to, and that's going to continuously fall.
It's
fade
$400
away.
a reel, and there's 2 companies in the world that make it. One's in Pennsylvania. I'll give them a shout out. ATR Services, thank you. And then there's a company, I can't remember the name, but they're in France.
So it's like no more 3M, no more Ampeg, no more. So
EASF,
that could have been a revolutionary device, the CLASP. I mean, that's genius.
I think Kiss bought a system, Aerosmith uses it, Lenny Kravitz has it at his private studio down in Miami. So we're the only studio commercially in Florida that has it. And people come from all over the country to record with us just because they can get that analog sound. You got a bunch of Neves hitting tape.
Yeah, so explain the rooms. How many rooms is it? 3-room, 2-room facility?
We've got Studio A is the big tracking room. We added a Studio M, which is like a hybrid mixing mastering room. It's not just dedicated mastering. I mean, we got a 4000E that Mike Johnson and my friend Jeff Sansone, both of those guys are brilliant technicians. They hot rodded it. So it's a 4000E that's got a lot of modifications on it. It sounds badass.
Sweet.
That came out of Royal Recorders in Wisconsin, and Chili Peppers, Skid Row, Queensryche, Live, Throwing Copper. There's all these big name records if you're into the voodoo of what music went through the console.
Was that in Madison, Wisconsin? I know Smart Studios was in Madison.
It's up that way. It was in a studio that was hooked into a Playboy mansion.
Oh, wow. Oh, yeah,
a casino.
Lake Geneva.
Yes.
Lake Geneva. Yeah, exactly.
So Michael Wagner was using it for a lot of the Skid Row stuff. And so you had all these 80s rockers wanting to go up there because there's a casino.
Oh, yeah. The
Playboy bunnies running around. And an amazing studio with guys like Michael Wagner, who's just legendary engineer. And somehow it ended up in New York, was beat to hell after that studio went under. And Mike seems the Clear Tracks owner. Mike just seems like he finds the deal somehow. And he bartered and traded. And I remember pulling it off the trailer and it looked a mess. And 4 months later, it looks brand new. He poured money and a lot of sweat equity into getting that thing running. So that's in M. And we've got a combination in the rack of like really nice mastering gear, you know, the cream of the crop stuff. And then there's some of the stuff in the rack is for mixing. So it gets used it's a dual purpose room.
Dual purpose, yeah.
Then Studio B is more of like, I'll call it an urban room. It's smaller, it's more intimate. A lot of hip hop artists, R&B, and you can do overdubs, acoustic guitars,
single
and sax,
vocal booth.
But it's a 24-channel SSL 4000G.
Oh, perfect.
I think it might be a plus. Yeah, that's been modified too, and that B room is just constantly booked.
Yeah, I mean, because the majority of the time, if you're doing any type of R&B hip hop, you know, you already have the sequence, everything coming out of your laptop or your drum machine. That's stereo, and then you got your vocals, and then you got your stacks, and that's everything on the console.
And we have some really nice mics in that room too. That just people want to come there just for the microphones. Of course, there's a Sony C800G. Mike just recently bought the U67 reissue, so that's in there. Got a couple 251s that Dallas Upton made that they're literally replicas.
Really?
Telefunk and E-Lams, they sound great too. So a couple of those mics float around, but the Sony pretty much stays in there.
Is the rock star.
All the hip hop guys want to
that's the money
take
shot.
selfies with that mic because it does sound great. It's very... I
mean, that's what we used in the late 90s, cutting all the Atlanta records. It was the prime urban R&B. Yeah, exactly.
You were working on.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just
golden sounding.
The detail is stunning. And I put it up on some rock guys once in a while, and sometimes it works. Most of the time, the Neumanns.
Guitars get in the way.
Yeah.
It seems like when you're using the Sony with that. So in A, tell me about the console that's in Studio
the 8000G Plus. So that came out of the record plant. And rumor has it Dr. Dre mixed the Chronic on that record, that console. Clear Tracks got it like 12 or 13 years ago. And a couple Metallica records. Bob Rock mixed Load and Reload. I think I was looking through the SSL computer
to see if there's any settings saved.
And I'm looking at names, and I'm seeing Hugh Pagnam, who's this amazing British producer, engineer, mixing guy. He does Sting. I saw his name in there on a couple projects, and it looked like he did some of the Peter Gabriel stuff. Wow. I don't know if it's just mixing or tracking, but there was automation files in there. I was looking at it. So Bob Rock. Cool. There was some movies. I think Armageddon with Bruce Willis.
It's like the templates today, right? You're pulling up, Pro Tools template. It's like, look at this template. Back in the day, you had the SSL automation, and you can actually see and adjust everything. Remember when you had the screen? I think it was the SSL. When you had the screen before it was even colorized, it looked like the green. It looked like the video game.
DOS commands.
Oh my gosh, bro! And we had a pain in the ass.
I just remember typing in stuff /
and you can hear the damn the keyboard clank 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 because it was like the Commodore 64 keyboards that they always used. Remember the big buttons?
Yeah.
But I'm glad things have changed in that sense.
Yeah, I mean, there's some cats like Bob Clearmountain still swears by that automation system. He's a badass. So.
Yeah, I mean, you live and know and stick with what has made you money and giving you the name.
And if it's reliable and it works,
no reason to change the game up.
No, and before that, we would. I'm sure you were doing this too. You'd have poster board up on the wall with your moves, and everyone would have faders and mutes, and you would be printing to a tape machine, a half-inch, quarter-inch, and it's a performance.
It is. It really
and
it's
is. Exciting, though.
It is. And you get in the groove. It's almost like if you look at, the DJs of today, the EDM market, up there, they're grooving, they're doing the mixing. For them is, blending the beats in and out and the acapella and so forth. It's very similar to what it was like for engineers in the 80s, 70s, 60s even, where you had a team, or if it wasn't yourself, you had a team of people. Okay, I'm going to work the drums here. All right, I got the rhythm section. All right, you got the background vocals.
You get the secretary from the front desk.
Yeah, totally. And have her ride the master fade out.
You would put down tape and just mark your spots and your times. And if one person misses it, you got to back up and start over and print it. And you were like, you know, when you got a print that everyone made the moves right, it was like, yes.
Yes. Oh, and then you would open the back door and it would be just reels of the tape.
Yes.
From top to bottom. And you would be so pissed if somebody would tape over yours and be like, God, I'm still working on this session. Who taped over my shit?
Yeah, that's fun
Those
times.
are the good times. You know, that was true file management back then, man. Unlike today.
That's why you mentioned earlier, being able to have an assistant that knows documentation, even in Pro Tools nowadays, typing in the comments, what mics, what pre's, what compressor, you know, and any other sort of little notes to give the mixing engineer who
guidance.
They get passed to, you know, down the line. If you track it and someone else is mixing, I feel like you got to fill out those comments.
Yeah, super important.
It's just, I can't stress enough, having a great assistant is critical.
Key. Because at the end of the day, it's about time consumption, and the less time spent on the mediocre things and the more time spent on the actual project, that's going to create value for everybody. So the strength of an assistant engineer, how would one become an assistant engineer? Would it be going to school, possibly, as such, over at ClearTrack? What is that mentor program all about?
I always give advice to these young guys. I've been doing this 35 plus years now. I'm like the older guy. I'm the elders statesman on staff there. So, but I explain in the class, like, after the class is over, it's 10 classes. And it's like a mentoring program, but we encourage them to intern there. Yeah. And I tell them, like, you know, you're going to make coffee, clean toilets, sweep, dust. You're going to do all these odd jobs, but sometimes one of the engineers there may need help. Mm-hmm. So you get pulled into a session and now you're micing the drum kit or micing guitar amps or whatever it is. So I just have the attitude that, at least back in my day, like you just need to be in the building.
Yeah,
and see business.
You need to be around that environment.
Exactly, the creative
environment. Know the lingo,
environment.
know what people are talking, understand what this means, what that means. You know what I mean? And it's so crucial.
Oh, it is. It's critical. And so I get them to, at least the ones that are hungry, will intern. And typically it's 3 months. Mm-hmm. And I tell them, like, look, during class, you kind of learn the rooms. And then when you're interning, you're gaining more experience. And they'll give the interns like a room-only rate. I said, you know the rooms now. Bring some projects in that are your friends, rent the room, and try to build a strong demo reel. Because you know, like...
That's crucial. That's so important.
You can have all this stuff on your resume, but it's really hearing the
end result.
Someone that may hire you, they want to hear your work.
Yeah.
So but it seems like a lot of people think that there's like a fast forward button. And it took 10 years before I got like any sort of major label credit as an assistant. So I try to tell them like my journey so they understand, like, you just can't become a mixer tomorrow. Practice it. But I feel like I was told at KGEM and at the warehouse, like, you need to understand how to track stuff and make it sound like $1 million. Then you'll assist in the mixing room. You had to earn your stripes to move up. And there's no fast forward button. It just takes time.
Yeah, because you have to make mistakes. You have to. That's the only way you're going to learn.
And I tell them in class, this is the time to make mistakes with me, not with
when
a
it's
client.
on a budget.
You know, and it's just a process and it's time. And some people just get too antsy and they give up. Like when we were teaching at Full Sail, like some of those guys would go out to LA, work their way up. And I remember hearing stories like a couple guys that we taught ended up like doing the Outcast record and the Hey Ya song and got Grammys. And just, you know, that out of all the students we taught, some of them do, you know, have the hunger to go out there and make it. We gave them the basic skills, but then they made it happen.
That's right. That's it. taken back to when you were mentioning you're looking through the back of Rolling Stone, I think it was magazine for...
It was Mix.
Mix, okay. Let's take it back a couple more decades, all right? In Rolling Stone, in the back of Rolling Stone magazine, do you remember what Full Sail used to be? It was always Full Sail, but do you remember what the slogan was?
We take your dreams seriously?
Well, that's right. Well, that's one, okay.
I don't remember.
But the pitch was, do you want to go to rock and roll high school? That was in the back of Rolling Stone magazine.
Pitch, too.
Yeah. And I mean, that when everybody saw it, like, what? What's this? And it was learn audio, learn video. And when I went, 26 kids in my class we had audio and video combined.
Is that when they were doing classes
at Park?
At Park Studios, and I think the offices were in a trailer or something.
Platinum Post was 9 to 9, working facility, and then 9 p.m. at night to 9 a.m. The suites were opened up for the students. Room A, the Neve, Flying Faders, and then that's where I interned after I graduated, worked under Platt.
And if you fast forward to now and walk through that campus, it's really amazing what they've done.
Yeah.
And when you go to those schools, it's not cheap.
No,
but
it's
at
not.
the same time, if you're hungry enough,
and
there's some great instructors.
Yeah, there is.
I feel like it.
I think you got to find a program that fits you.
Yeah,
your personality, right? If you're more of an individual that needs that one-on-one, you're going to be wanting to do everything, you produce everything yourself. You may want to get into a mentorship program. Where you want to engineer your own things. You really want to understand the nuts and bolts of how the world operates. That's the benefit of getting into a mentorship, right? You're not in a classroom.
Right.
You're actually working with clients.
At Clear Tracks, you're working in $1 million rooms. And I know you're not going to have an SSL in your house. Maybe you will someday, hopefully. But we always teach it from the point of view that we're teaching you skill set, techniques, and it doesn't necessarily mean, you're going to have the SSL or super expensive microphones, but it's just
learning how to use the tools.
It's a mentoring thing where there's one-on-one classes I teach where it's me and the student and Mike.
Yeah.
Mike goes over acoustics. He gets into a lot of the sciencey tech stuff, wiring, patch-based stuff. So we kind of split up the classes when we do one-on-one, and then we have a group class that we do on Sunday nights where we cap it at 4 students, so it still stays.
Yeah, relatively small.
And I grill them. I make them patch and route, and both of us give instructions like we're producers and making them go through it and putting a little pressure on them.
Yeah.
But that's how you build confidence.
Agreed. Yeah. It's and when it's on that one-on-one environment, I think it gives them more opportunity to ask questions. Not maybe intimidated by the other
student's going to be embarrassed because I tell them no question is stupid. When I walked into KGEM and took the first classes I took, I looked at that SSL and all that gear. I'm like, how in the hell am I going to understand this?
Yeah,
but eventually, if you're working under someone patient and you show enthusiasm and positivity and work ethic, I always believe the big name guys would always tell me, always be early and be the last to leave.
That's right. Yeah.
And that's still
it's really that
true
simple.
Today.
It is honestly that simple. And make sure you don't bitch and complain during the process.
Yeah, I was also told when I was an assistant that handle the documentation, keep the session moving forward, get us lunch, make strong coffee, and don't get out of your lane. Sit in the corner. You're a fly on the wall. If you just watch and listen, you'll learn a ton.
Yeah.
And then when I need you, I'll call for you to move a mic or whatever.
Sure.
And
because you can't, when you're in a creative environment, you can't read people, right? And you may think that you're having a genuine conversation with these people in regard to their project. And then that night you get called in by the studio manager, says they don't want you in there anymore. Like, what do you mean we're cool? No, the synergy has to be right. And that's why it's important. People who are fresh and new to these environments, please stay in your lane and you're going to learn a hell of a lot more and you're going to get a lot further.
It's so important not to, I've had students sometimes or my assistant sometimes in the past, trying to push their way into like being on the song or something.
Yeah.
I'm like, I pull him aside, like, nah, he doesn't want keyboards on this.
Yeah. Yeah, that's going a little too far when you start suggesting
Now,
creative
if they
influence.
ask you, if the artist asks you, hey, I hear you play keyboards, can you put in
Then that's when
parts?
you say yes.
Yeah, then it's an opportunity.
Yeah.
So it's,
Well, that's some good advice, my friend. And how do they get in touch with the school? Does it have a specific name?
It's called the Art of Sound Recording.
Okay.
And we'll show on the screen.
Yeah,
the
we'll
link.
share all
I'll
the
get it for
information.
you. And there's goes over on the website. It goes over every class. First couple of years, me and Mike refined it. We've been doing it 12 years now. So we've got a 3-ring binder with the classes. I expect you to read. There's some homework.
Yeah.
We actually have 2. It's like the one-on-ones can kind of be scheduled anytime based around your work. But there's 8 classes that are 4 or 5 hours. And if we're on a roll, I just go longer sometimes if someone doesn't comprehend compression or something. But
There's flexibility there.
Yeah,
in
there's
helping
flexibility.
people.
And there's 2 classes that are 10-hour days. I bring in a local
That's
band.
cool.
I train the students to run CLASP, so they're running tape with Pro Tools,
Sweet.
and they got a 10-hour tracking day. And we make it so that it's not really a class. I bring in guys that want to cut original tunes, and it's a challenge to the student. I bring in the producer.
It's not the boombox on the microphone.
No.
All right, get signal flow for us, guys.
Yeah, so it's, it makes them, it's a window into what the day of a tracking engineer is like.
Yeah.
And you got to make them happy with the guitar tones. If it ain't happening, swap mics, get out there, move mics, patch 2 different pre's.
And don't go over there and start making
me and
changes
Mike lay
on
back
there.
and let them do it. And it's hands-on art. Like there's so many, classes on YouTube and training you stuff, but this is a hands-on art.
Yeah.
You got to be in the room and do stuff and hear it.
Yeah.
Patch stuff, grab microphones. You can watch someone run software or something and maybe learn a little bit, but I only say this is a hands-on art.
Yeah, you got to drive the car. You can't just sit in the virtual seat and think you know how to drive it because it doesn't run that way. And use your ears, people. Don't look at the waveforms all the time. It's not good. Not good for your eyes. Bad for your ears too.
I tell anyone, use your ears. Don't stare at the waveforms and stare.
Yeah.
Back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, I wasn't tracking I'm not that old. I wasn't tracking in the 60s, not even really in the 70s, but you had a console, your speakers, a remote for the tape machine, and there was no looking at Pro Tools.
Nothing. It was looking in dead space and really closing your eyes and then going to the channel and being able to use 2 fingers, 2 hands, and twist and sweep filters and adjust things on different channels. Now you're restricted to a click of a mouse. So you can't really feel like you used to anymore unless you're working on analog. Analog is where it's at. Hey.
Just touching the gear and
in the
there's
feel
a synergy when you're dialing in stuff. And plugins are great tools too sometimes.
Yeah, they'll work.
But I think we're in a hybrid world where it's a little of both.
Yeah, and I'm glad that it's not all digital.
No.
It was momentarily. When it first came out, everybody's like, we got to try it. We got to do this, man. Look how quick we can work. Look, I can pull up the session in 2 seconds, not 2 hours now.
There's a danger with some of that stuff too. Like you can constantly open your DAW and just keep tweaking.
To what end?
Yeah, you're just changing it to change it.
Yeah.
So you have to know when you hit that end point where it sounds great and kind of let it go at a certain point.
Right. Don't look back.
Change the snare reverb, EQ this, and sometimes you overproduce something that way.
Big time. Too many toys can definitely saturate the production of the song.
That leads me to the other thing with when we're running CLASP, you got 24 tracks, and you have to know what a good take is and what a great take is. Because you got to know to overwrite stuff sometimes. Mm-hmm. Whereas some people will sit there with 100 playlists on the vocal.
Play over.
And you're creating more work for yourself. I feel like...
And are you really performing your art the best it should be performed, or are you just being lazy and doing another one?
Comp it and tune it kind of thing. And just, I feel producers and engineers would just make command decisions. They had a gut instinct to what an amazing take
everything
is.
was extreme destructive. So your decisions had to be spot on,
so
precise.
It keeps you focused and on point.
Yeah,
Pro Tools is great. Other DAWs are great. Logic, they're all good. They're all powerful, but it's all in how the user utilizes them. And it's just like sometimes people abuse stuff, but it is.
Oh, speaking of abuse, are you ready to get abused by our next co-host here, Trevor?
Well, let me say this too about Clear Tracks. Like, the thing that I do a lot personally is mastering these days. But once in a while, when a really good band comes along, I'm working with this band called the Dirty Janes out of Tampa. Just want to mention them because we've got Matt producing, and my former student Al is my Pro Tools operator and assistant. So he went from class one-on-one to, working in the rooms. He interned there for a while, and I kind of hit it off with him, and now he's my guy.
Nice. So every time you have a tracking session,
we're cutting a full record over there, and they're kind of like the 70s retro thing. They're like very old souls in their early 20s, and looking to have some big name mixer mix it. My friend Shelly or Bob Clear Mountain are one of those guys. So I just wanted to give them a shout out because it's really great songwriters, great talented band, and
probably a fun project.
We're hammering away, hitting tape at Clear Tracks.
That's cool. So, hitting the CLASP.
Yes.
Hitting the CLASP.
Oh, and just drums, bass, guitars, hit that. Just
nothing better.
Polish.
Yeah.
I call it velvet.
It is velvet.
But it's punchy though, too.
Yeah, you can't mimic it. You can't mimic that.
No.
For sure. All right, my man, I'm going to get Trevor on board, and then we'll see what he has questionnaires for you.
Absolutely.
All right.
We should talk about mastering, too.
Yes.
That's my thing.
He will talk about mastering with you.